Dystopia dress rehearsal. This is the Great Reset model state, where the clinical trial, quote unquote, of the world that the New World Order wants takes place. In the New World Order, as dreamed by the Great Reset, a model is considered ideal, and this is already being applied as a dress rehearsal or clinical test to measure the endurance and obedience of the test animal citizens, and it is different from the Chinese model of governance. It's just basically the same thing. As it stands, China continues to represent a model of authoritarian dreams, a research study in mass psychological torture. Far from being a counterpoint to globalists, it's actually a globalist work in progress. Whatever happens there will sooner or later be applied to the West. China as a factor and co-witness, quote unquote, at the table of the New World Order of things. For over a decade, there has been a love affair between globalization and the Chinese model of government, which many leading advocates of global centralization, such as Henry Kissinger and George Soros, have praised. In fact, they have hinted in the past that communist China is developing into an important factor in the New World Order. George Soros expressed this very sentiment in 2009, around the time China began courting the IMF and issuing trillions of yuan-denominated government debt to join its global currency initiative. Several years later, China joins the IMF special drawing rights basket. The CCP, China that is, now strongly supports the creation of a new world monetary system with the IMF in control. This is a reality. China is not opposed to global centralization under the control of Western oligarchs. All they want is a prominent seat at the table when the Great Reset begins and full concentration. And China wants to be present and have a role there. Is the China-globalist relationship only economic? Does the alliance go even further? Clearly. Recently, Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum, the WEF, gave an interview to the Chinese government-controlled CGTN and the APEC summit in Bali. In the interview, Schwab praised China as a model for many other nations, and what he said is quoted at the end. This may shock some people who see China's economy as faltering, with its global exports plunging in 2022 and its housing market crashing into rubble. This decline is largely due to global stagflation, but also due to their insane zero-COVID policy, which has kept the nation under pandemic lockdown for years. China's economy is now in freefall, with its manufacturing base under extreme pressure from the lockdowns, the Chinese rebellion and the suppression. But the Chinese people are fed up with the draconian measures and are rising up. The Chinese government sent the hazmat-clad troops to quell the uprising while beating protesters to the ground. A protest at the Apple factory was also suppressed due to the lockdown and what it was doing to the lives of the workers there. Apple loves authoritarianism, like all companies run by globalization, and that explains Apple's hostility to Elon Musk's free speech policies on Twitter. China continues to terrorize citizens with special police visits to dissidents and fleets of drones hovering over city streets, monitoring pedestrians, shouting propaganda messages, and spraying strange chemicals in the air above them. Some drones are even spraying entire city blocks with unknown chemicals. Meanwhile, China has fully implemented digital vaccine certificate systems linked to public places and retail stores. Citizens cannot function, even move, in a major Chinese city without an up-to-date vaccine certificate or negative COVID test performed every 2 weeks. Why? All these events and situations are often treated as disconnected or random, and unfortunately no one is asking the right questions. The big question is why? Because the Chinese government is sabotaging its economy with lockdowns and oppressing the population to the point of open rebellion, a rare occurrence among the usually subservient Chinese people. Why continue the lockdowns when it's clear to the rest of the world that the pandemic is over or coming to an end and that the lockdowns and masks never worked in the first place? If vaccines work, why impose restrictions and lockdowns? If it's because vaccines don't work, then why force people to vaccinate? And further, if mask lockdowns are working, then why is China facing yet another supposed wave of COVID infections? And the CCP does not care about the welfare of the average Chinese citizens. There's no logic in anything they do, just as there was no logic in anything some others in the West did. Biden, Fauci, CDC. The difference is that Americans were able to force the US to abandon the compulsion data, the agenda, mainly through non-compliance. In China, the imposed culture is convenient for leadership. Why? The country was a dystopia before, now it's something different. It's an experiment in technocracy tyranny taken to extremes. China's leadership is willing to starve, arrest, beat, even do away with people it claims is trying to protect from the virus. It's no mistake that almost every policy implemented by China is a direct copy of policies proposed by the WEF and institutions such as Imperial College London in 2020 at the beginning of the epidemic. Globalists have argued that we are not going back to normal and that the public will have to sacrifice many of their freedoms to stop the pandemic. In fact, none of their policies were effective in stopping the spread, but they were very effective in suppressing the population. And in China's case, nothing has returned to normal. China's rationale is directly and inextricably linked to the country's long-standing relationship with globalists and the Chinese leadership desire to be part of the New World Order, also referred to as the multipolar world order, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, the Great Reset, and a dozen other names. China's image shows the true vision of globalization for the future, with oppression and suffering multiplied. China is a beta test, a test for those seeking another centrally controlled world to see what level of tyranny the people are willing to endure. Perhaps a test of the functionality of different surveillance systems and control mechanisms. Perhaps practice for the inevitable riots and rebellion that would occur in many countries, how best to deal with them. Globalists like Klaus Schwab are not only interested in China as an economic model, but see China as a social model for much of the West, with some modifications here and there. The problem for the establishment is that if there are visible examples of freedom despite COVID, then other nations will begin to question the necessity of their own lockdowns. Even the Chinese people are starting to fight back. They cannot implement their new order in a country at a time. They will have to oppress many countries at once. Those who oppose the lockdowns in the West sent a strong message, even if the reasons were psychological and economic. Maybe the economy is saved from political tyranny, but vigilance is needed. However, it remains that if the fans of the Great Reset had gotten what they really wanted, the world would be closer to China right now. Klaus Schwab, founder and president of World Economic Forum, WEF, China's totalitarian model is the most suitable for the world, he said. In an interview with a Chinese media outlet, he declared that China is a role model for other nations. Schwab, 84 years old, made the comments during an interview with CGTN's Tian Wei on the sidelines of last week's APEC summit in Bangkok, Thailand. Schwab said he respects China's tremendous achievements in modernizing its economy over the past 40 years. He says, "I think it's a model for a lot of countries," Schwab said, before confirming that he believes each country should make its own decisions about what system it wants to adapt. Zero freedoms for the future. I think we have to be very careful about imposing systems, but the Chinese model is certainly a very attractive model for several countries, Schwab said, referring to a country with zero freedoms, a social credit system, and constant state surveillance. It's a model that has been adapted by the great financial elites of the planet, as they believe that there is a surplus workforce that's no longer needed due to technological developments, and these people should be brought under control and have just the necessities to survive. In 2019, according to China's own statistics, 11 million have left and moved to other countries just to escape it, with about a third coming to the US. China has the third highest rate of global immigration after India and Mexico. The Great Reset. Schwab's organization has infiltrated the industry, sometimes with real monetary interests, and influenced many others to adapt capitalism of the interested parties. It also influenced many to adapt to what is being called the Great Reset worldwide, according to some news reports. All of them, of course, face government scrutiny caused by the threat of global warming, which is not based on actual scientific data. This is by Banking News Greece. I've translated this for you from a Greek article. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.